22 days from now, actually forget about the 22, 21 days from now, about a dozen of the NFL's future stars, at least they hope so, will be in Green Bay doing a Play 60 event, because that's what you always do the day before the draft, and, wondering where their future will take them. It's pretty cool. Where does my life go from here? Because 21 days from now, everyone's going to be in Green Bay for the draft. Let's figure out who the heck is picking whom. Actually, we don't know. But that's why this is an amazing industry, the pre-draft industry. Trevor Sikkema is at the heart of that industry. From PFF, their draft analyst, Tampa Trey. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, Andrew. Appreciate you having me on, my friend.
Appreciate you coming on. How do you, in silly season, and we just came back from the annual meeting where all the coaches and GMs speak and no one wants to tell you anything. I also call it lying season, right? How do you make sense of anything said by any coach or GM right now?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. Some call it smokescreen season for the alliteration, because everybody loves a good alliteration, but the theme stays. You really just try to get little hints. I think from new general managers and new coaches, sometimes I don't have a specific example off the top of my head, but sometimes they're just so excited to sort of be in that seat, be in that chair, be with that interview that sometimes they give a little bit more away than they want to. And so I think that can sometimes be the case there with some new general managers and head coaches. But a lot of the seasoned ones, they're not really going to tell you anything. You really have to look at some of their draft history to kind of get more towards like, okay, yeah, sure, this team needs a corner, but they've never really picked a corner in the first round. They're normally picking them somewhere on day 2. You see different targets and different, I think, trends that you can notice historically a lot more than, like you said, lying season, smoke screen season, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes you do get those little nuggets here and there, though, so it makes you pay attention to all of it, especially when you compare it with who they end up selecting when it's all said and done. But it is hard to parse, there's no doubt.
Yeah, look at the Titans. I always have fans come back at me and go, hey, wait a minute. They said, Borgonzi said, or maybe it was Chad Brinker said back in January at the presser, generational player. So that means they're not taking Cam Ward because he's not generational. And then the other people push back and go, but wait, they took 15 people to Pro Day, including their entire content team. That has to mean they're taking him. And I remind people, it is a show. It is a show. So they are going to put on a show. They need a Godfather deal to Trey out of it. Of course, that's what they're going to say. But as we sit here 22 days away, the group think, Trevor Sikkema, is that they're taking Cam Ward. Do you buy that?
I do, and I'm going to be honest with you, Andrew. I wasn't buying it when we were at the Combine. This is obviously pre-free agency, and I think that's a draft analyst's best friend is the words, well, it depends what happens in free agency, because you can never be wrong about your draft analysis before we get to free agency. Oh, everything changed. They signed this guy, they didn't sign this guy, so it's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. But you're right. Brinker, back in January, he said, hey, we're not going to pass up on a generational prospect at number 1 just because we might need a certain position, even at quarterback. And then Mike Borgonzi, to your credit, he also said, he was asked, I believe it was at the Combine, do you think there are generational players in this draft? And he says, yes, I do think that there are generational players in this draft. So a lot of people took that, myself included, took those clues and said, okay, well, then I think it's going to be one of either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. And I think the needs for the Titans, Abdul Carter is the one that fits more. So that made me think, if you would have asked me this question, and a lot did at the Combine, I would have told you that the Titans are going to take Abdul Carter at number 1 overall. But then we get to free agency, and the Titans don't do anything at quarterback. They really don't do anything at all. And when I thought about Abdul Carter going number 1 overall, it was always under the impression that they would do something at quarterback. A Russell Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers, some sort of veteran in there to at least, be able to sell the fan base that it would be different than the year before. They basically just have Will Levis on the roster now at this point. And so they're not really hiding it anymore at this point. And so I've also heard, now whether this is because this is what they're going to do or not, but I've heard the Titans actually like Cam Ward quite a bit. And a lot of people in that building actually love him. So I don't know if they're going to try and sell the fan base that, hey, you know what? We weren't lying to you at the beginning. We said we'd take a generational player. We believe that Cam Ward has the ability to be a generational type quarterback for this organization. I don't know if that's what they're going to end up coming out and say, but it does feel like all roads lead to Cam Ward, because there is just no way that they can go into this next season with Will Levis as basically the best option that they have on the roster at quarterback. So from what we saw them do in free agency, or I should say lack thereof, it makes me pretty dang confident that Cam Ward's going to be the first name that we hear, and it's going to be to the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, as a Browns guy, which I do work for the team, people ask me, who do you want? I say I want Cam Ward, but that's just me. I don't think he is going to be there. If he is there somehow, some way, I would be happy. And of course, it also sets up, for the next 10 years, if it is Cam Ward at number one, the conversation, is he generational? Much like the is Joe Flacco elite question. That the next iteration of that is he generational? Trevor, a year ago we sat here and I asked you the question, the player that may surprise you in the draft, and you came back. I don't remember how I phrased it, but I remember what you said. You said that basically J.J. McCarthy controls the draft, and I'm paraphrasing. In that once the top couple of quarterbacks are off the board, the big three that went in the top four, once they are off the board, that J.J. McCarthy is the one player that people are going to try to get up and get, and that will move the day. You were right. The Vikings made their move, and now a year later, funny how that works. Is there a player today, Trevor, that you would give the same label?
I don't think, I wouldn't say that it's a quarterback, so it's a little bit different. It doesn't hold as much weight. I think to answer that question, though, three players come to mind. Two of them are in the same bucket. One of them is a little bit of a different story. I think that whoever is going to be available at number 3 or number 4 overall between Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, that is really what controls things, because, depending on the teams in the top 4, top 5 that have those quarterback needs, maybe we do get a Shedeur Sanders. Maybe he does pop into the top 3. And if that's the case, well, then all of a sudden New England's going to be sitting there at number 4, and they're going to have one of Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter on the board. And I think that's where the draft really begins. I think that number 5 overall pick is where the draft really begins, just because you want to figure out what's going to happen between those two guys. And if one of Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter happens to make it to number 4, well, then it's all wide open, especially if it is a guy like Abdul Carter, because then you're going to have teams like maybe the Chicago Bears, maybe the Carolina Panthers, depending on what the Jets think of their current pass rushing situation. I know it's more interior than it is on the edge, but you've got so many teams then at that point that would be willing to trade up for this caliber of a player. So if Abdul Carter gets to number 4, I think that's where the draft can get totally blown wide open. But I also think that Tyler Warren is sort of that player to really answer your question in the spirit in which you are asking, because he is going to be, in my opinion, viewed as a consensus top 10 player in this class from basically every single NFL team. Now, is he going to get picked in the top 10? I'm not sure, but there's a lot of, when I hear coaches, like, for example, maybe they're not using Tyler Warren's name specifically, but you listen to these coaches at NFL owners meetings and they're talking about tight ends and just how difficult it is for defensive coordinators to match up against guys that have this type of talent, how offensive coordinators and play callers love to build their entire scheme around players like this. I think that even for teams that may not have a dire tight end need, he is going to be pretty high on their board. So he, to me, is the ultimate wild card of the fact that I could see Tyler Warren going to so many different situations in the top 12. And I'm very curious at just how these teams are going to covet this type of player with where he's going to be on consensus big boards.
Talking to Trevor Sikkema here from PFF. I have 2 outrageous takes. I don't know if I believe either of them, but I'm going to just make them hypotheticals. Tell me what you think. Take number 1. Jaxson Dart will go before Shedeur Sanders. Trevor, your thoughts?
I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's likely, but in the sense of, hey, we're giving out hot takes, I do think that you at least have a chance for this one to be right. And the reason why I say that is because I have no idea where Jaxson Dart is going to go in this upcoming draft. And I know I'm a draft guy. I kind of get paid to have an answer there. Well, I'm sorry, I don't have one for this type of a prospect, because when I watch Jaxson Dart, I would tell you that his film says more about, hey, this is sort of a day two type of bet to take. You let him sit a little bit. He can watch and learn. You like the arm talent. You like the natural athleticism. But there are so many quarterback desperate teams that we have this year that all of a sudden we know you're basically in one of two buckets. You're either a team that has a quarterback, you're a team that does not, especially when it comes to one that gives you hope for the long term. I don't think at this point his craze is above Shedeur Sanders. I think Shedeur Sanders is going to go before Jaxson Dart, but it's not crazy to think that he would sneak into the first round. Let's say that Shedeur ends up going really early. Maybe a guy like Jaxson Dart ends up getting picked by the Pittsburgh Steelers at pick number 21, right? Like, I could see those realities existing, but it's how wide the gap is between the round grade that I have from the film on Jaxson Dart, which is that of more of a mid-day two, third round type of a quarterback I'd love to take a chance on to sit and develop, and where it feels like some people might take him. Because you got to remember this too. If a guy ends up going in the first round, history will tell you, well, see, the NFL thought Jaxson Dart was a first round pick. Maybe not the NFL, but it only takes one team to be able to do it. So I would tell you that it's not totally far-fetched. The dream's not dead, but I would tell you it's a long shot still at this point. I think Shedeur's going ahead of him.
Sorry, I cut you off there. And I always hear from Browns fans as well, just take the quarterback, whichever quarterback, take the best quarterback at 2. And I say, just because you pick a player at 2 doesn't mean he's the second best player in the draft. It means you picked him at 2 and he's always going to have that label. Like you said, well, then Jaxson Dart would always have that label. Let's say he goes 21. He was a first-round pick. Well, that's where he got picked. So, yes, that is a fact, but that doesn't mean he's the 21st player in the draft per se when it comes to talent. It just means someone took you there. It also puts an unreasonable at times expectation on that player that perhaps got quote-unquote overdrafted. Along those lines, while we're at it, before I give you my second crazy hot take here, do you think Shedeur is going to fall? Because that's groupthink right now. Sanders is going to fall, whatever that means.
I would have told you after the combine, and this was sort of my from everything that I heard at the NFL Combine, right? Because the Combine's not just about watching drills. It's also about what you hear. It's going out, it's talking to scouts, it's talking to general managers, to coaches. It's often talking to other media members who are very plugged in as well. I couldn't really find anybody to speak about Shedeur Sanders' draft stock with a lot of conviction as a first-round quarterback. So it made me think that his range is a lot closer, and the conversation about him is a lot closer to that I just had about Jaxson Dart than it is about Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward's basically a lock for the top 3. There's no way he's getting out of the top 3. I think Shedeur Sanders could possibly go into the top 3, maybe to a team like the Cleveland Browns, which are trying to turn the page at the quarterback position, maybe to a team like the New York Giants, who, okay, they have Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson on the roster, but it's not like those are heavy guaranteed long-term deals. They could still take a guy like Shedeur Sanders. But then I could see him slide into 21 with the Pittsburgh Steelers, sliding all the way to the second round. His range is just so vast. And so I was one of those people after the combine that felt as though it was more realistic that he was going to slide outside of the top 3 than he was going to get picked in the top 3, because at that time, before the combine, that felt like consensus. And so I do lean a little bit more towards him falling down the draft order from what it was originally predicted, just because of sort of like how I evaluated him as a prospect. But just like we talked about with these QB needy teams, if you don't have any answers, good chance you're probably going to pick one just because you got to take a swing at the bat. So that it is so hard to answer the where is Shedeur going to go question, because I think the tape would tell you he's more of a, again, second round quarterback that I'd love to have sit and take a bet on for him to develop a little bit later into his rookie contract. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of teams that just need a quarterback right now. And so maybe going back to that conversation, is he a number 2 overall pick type of a player? Maybe not. But that might be what Cleveland feels like they have to do, because they got to get an answer there. So he's all over the place. But I think the conversation about Shedeur is closer to the draft range of Jaxson Dart than it is of Cam Ward.
Interesting. All right. And now in our final minute, we're tight on time. And we thank you, Trevor Sikkema. Hot take number 2, purely hypothetical. Here we go. Omarion Hampton will go before Ashton Jeanty.
That is indeed hot. I know you are not alone there. It is hot. I'm still saying that Ashton Jeanty, for the unbelievable season that he had, and the overall notoriety of what this past season was from him, is why he is going to go as the number 1 running back. But I say this all the time. it's a little unfortunate that Omarion Hampton's in the same running back class as Ashton Jeanty, because he'd be a damn good running back 1 in so many other draft classes. So I like the spirit of it, but I don't think he's going ahead of Ashton Jeanty. So I think that one's pretty hot as well.
I've had a GM tell me he might like one better than the other. So there's that.
I told you weren't alone. I told you weren't alone.
That thought is out there. Follow Tampa Trey, will you please? Trevor, congratulations on the recent nuptials, and happy draft season to you and yours, my friend. Always appreciate your insight.
What a wonderful honeymoon to be watching day 3 draft prospects from now until draft night. Thanks, Andrew.
Oh, you gotta love it, honey. No, you go down to the beach. You go down to the beach. I'm looking at Justin Barron. Is he a safety or a linebacker? That's what I'm doing. Thank you, Trev. Appreciate you.
See you guys.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.